On Palm Sunday, March 21st, 1937, a peaceful march in Ponce, Puerto Rico, turned into a massacre. Organized by the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party, the march was meant to commemorate the abolition of slavery in 1873 and protest the imprisonment of their leader, Pedro Albizu Campos. But as the unarmed civilians gathered, they were met with gunfire. When the shooting stopped, 19 people were dead, 17 civilians and 2 policemen, and over 200 civilians were wounded. This is the story of the Ponce Massacre, a tragedy that exposed the brutal reality of U.S. rule over the island. To understand the Ponce Massacre, we need to go back to Puerto Rico's colonial past. For over 400 years, the island was a Spanish colony, where slavery and exploitation shaped its economy and society. In 1898, after the Spanish-American War, Puerto Rico was ceded to the United States. Under U.S. rule, the island became a hotbed for American economic interests, with little regard for the rights or well-being of its people. By the 1930s, Puerto Rico was struggling under the weight of the Great Depression, with widespread poverty, unemployment, and political repression. It was during this time that the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party, founded in 1922, gained widespread support, demanding independence and an end to U.S. rule. The 1930s were a time of growing unrest in Puerto Rico. The Nationalist Party, under the leadership of Pedro Albizu Campos, had become a powerful voice for independence, challenging the U.S. control of Puerto Rico at every turn. In 1936, the U.S. struck back, arresting Albizu Campos and other nationalist leaders on charges of sedition. Their imprisonment sparked outrage across the island. On March 21, 1937, the Nationalists organized a peaceful march in Ponce to protest the arrest and to commemorate the 64th anniversary of the abolition of slavery in Puerto Rico. But the U.S. government, determined to crush dissent, saw the march as a direct challenge to its authority and prepared to respond with force. On the morning of March 21, 1937, the streets of Ponce were filled with hope and determination. The Puerto Rican Nationalist Party had obtained a legal permit out of courtesy for a peaceful march, even though it wasn't necessary. But behind the scenes, the U.S. appointed governor of Puerto Rico, General Blanton Winship, had ordered the march to be stopped by all means necessary. Police units from across the island, armed with rifles, machine guns, and tear gas, were deployed to Ponce, surrounding the marchers. As the crowd gathered, the atmosphere was tense but peaceful. The marchers, dressed in their Sunday best, carried Puerto Rican flags and sang La Borinqueña, the island's anthem. The cadets of the Republic, a youth wing of the Nationalist Party, led the procession. But as they began to march, the police opened fire. For over 15 minutes, bullets rained down on the unarmed crowd. People screamed and ran for their lives, but there was no escape. Many were shot in the back as they fled. Others were chased down and beaten or clubbed to death. When the shooting finally stopped, 19 people lay dead, 17 civilians and 2 policemen, and over 200 civilians were wounded. Among the dead were men, women, and even a young girl. The streets of Ponce were stained with blood, and the air was filled with the cries of the wounded and the grieving.
Sonó un disparo, y después de ese disparo vino una descarga.
Ahí se inició el tiroteo, nosotros nos lanzamos al suelo y es natural que las balas pasaran por encima de nosotros.
The brutality of the massacre was shocking. A young cadet, Bolívar Marquez, was shot and gravely wounded. As he lay dying, he dragged himself to a wall and used his own blood to write the words, Viva la República, abajo los asesinos, long live the Republic, down with the murderers. The flag bearer of the Cadets of the Republic was also killed, and a young girl, Carmen Fernandez, was gravely injured when she tried to take up the flag. Eyewitnesses described how the police continued to attack the wounded, clubbing and shooting those who tried to escape. No weapons were found on any of the civilians, and the march had been entirely peaceful. Yet, about 150 demonstrators were arrested and later released on bail. The massacre was a deliberate act of violence ordered by Governor Winship and carried out by the Insular Police to crush the nationalist movement and intimidate the people of Puerto Rico. In the aftermath of the massacre, the government moved quickly to control the narrative. Governor Winship radioed Washington, falsely claiming that the Nationalists had initiated the shooting. He stated that 2 shots were fired by the Nationalists, and that the police had shown great patience, consideration, and understanding. This misinformation was picked up by major U.S. newspapers, including the New York Times and Washington Post. Puerto Rican Senator and future Governor Luis Muñoz Marin traveled to Ponce to investigate. After examining a photograph taken by Carlos Torres of El Imparcial, he wrote that the image showed police firing not at armed nationalists, but at terrified crowds fleeing for their lives. This photograph, which captured white smoke from a policeman's revolver as he fired at unarmed civilians, became a key piece of evidence in exposing the truth. The official investigation, pressured by Governor Winship, was a sham. Winship instructed the public prosecutor, Rafael Perez, to arrest more nationalists and to avoid charging any police officers. Perez resigned in protest, refusing to participate in the cover-up. A second independent investigation was launched by the American Civil Liberties Union, led by Arthur Garfield Hayes and a team of Puerto Rican citizens. The Hayes Commission conducted a thorough investigation, interviewing survivors, examining evidence, and reviewing the photograph. The report was damning. The march had been peaceful, and the police had acted with excessive and unjustified force. They condemned the massacre as a mass execution and a grave injustice, criticizing Winship's repressive tactics and the systemic violation of civil rights. Despite the Hayes Commission's findings, no one was ever held accountable. No police officers were convicted, demoted, or suspended, and Winship never issued a public apology. The cover-up only deepened the pain of the victims' families and the outrage of the Puerto Rican people. The massacre had immediate consequences in Puerto Rico. On July 25, 1938, during a military parade in Ponce to mark the anniversary of the U.S. invasion of Puerto Rico, an attempt was made on Winship's life. Shots were fired at the grandstand where Winship and his officials were seated. Winship escaped unharmed, but 2 men, the assailant and a police officer, were killed, and 36 others were wounded. Winship's heavy-handed tactics and the massacre's aftermath led to him being removed from office by President Roosevelt in 1939. The Ponce Massacre left a lasting scar on Puerto Rico's history. It exposed the brutal reality of U.S. rule and galvanized the independence movement. But it also served as a stark reminder of the cost of resistance. Today, the massacre is remembered as a symbol of the struggle for justice and self-determination. Memorials in Ponce honor the victims, and their story continues to inspire those who fight for a better future. As we approach the anniversary of the massacre on March 21st, we remember the lives lost and the lessons learned. Their story is not just a part of Puerto Rico's past, but it's a call to action for all of us to stand up for justice and equality.